What's up, guys? Welcome to Waggle Friends English, and today we're going to talk about one of the biggest mistakes that we see intermediate speakers make consistently in grammar.
Yeah, that's the difference between many and much.
And being able to use these properly is completely reliant upon your understanding of count and non-count nouns.
Yeah. So like, is it too many monies or too much money?
Or is it too many people or too much people? What is the rule for many versus much? And why does that rule seem to change sometimes? Because I could say, I've had way too much candy.
Or I've had too many pieces of candy.
So you can use many or much with candy, but what are the rules on why and how?
So today we're going to break that down. We're going to give an easy rule for you guys to be able to use today and how that rule sometimes changes.
All right, so let's get into it. So the main thing with understanding when to use many and when to use much is being able to understand what count and non-count nouns are, which basically comes down, when do you use S to mean many of something versus when do you not use S?
Yeah, put simply, count nouns are things that are countable. I can say 1, 2, 3. Like if I say eggs, I can count the number of eggs. 1, 2, 3.
And generally speaking, when there's many of these things, when there's more than one, we will just add an S to the noun. So kids, dogs, cats. However, non-count nouns are things that it's not very easy to count. So things like rice or milk, water, gas.
Happiness.
Happiness, love. We don't usually put an S on that. If we do, then we mean something usually very different. So if I said loves, my loves, then I'm talking about my kids, basically. I really love my kids, so they are my loves. So typically things that are non-count nouns are liquids, gases, subjects of study, emotions, feelings, sports, minerals, materials, like we say wood, not it's made of woods. We say it's made of wood. Yeah,
the point is that these are not impossible to count. It's just that they're not simple to count at all.
Right.
And we have to, a lot of times, use something else to help us count the thing that we're talking about.
We would say a bowl of rice, not 1,003 grains of rice. So again, it's not impossible to count grains of rice, but we prefer to say grains of rice, a bowl of rice, a cup of rice, something like this, rather than saying rices.
That's a lot of rices.
That's a lot of rices.
So in terms of many or much, when you want to quantify something that is a count noun, so eggs or dogs, you will use the word many.
And this is specifically, you use many and much. Just a disclaimer here. Generally speaking, you use many or much for when you want to say there's a lot of something. I'm not sure exactly how much, but there is a lot. So if you say there are many dogs out there, you don't know how many dogs are out there. You could count them, but you really don't know. So you're just saying there's a lot of dogs. You could also say there are many dogs. Many and a lot of are direct synonyms.
So, for example, there are many people traveling to New York for spring break.
I have seen too many superhero TV shows.
And there are many questions that you have yet to answer.
So when you want to quantify a non-count noun, you will use much. Like, I just put too much milk in my cereal.
Or the garden got too much rain last night.
Or his mom shared way too much information with me.
Amber didn't eat much pasta at dinner last night.
I wasn't hungry.
A lot of the confusion between many and much come actually not from the noun necessarily, but from the measure word that we use with the noun.
Right. So the point of using a measure word with a non-count noun is that you can count the measure word. So instead of a cup of milk, you can also say cups of milk.
Right.
And you can use many with countable nouns or measure words. So you can say many cups of milk, or you have too much milk. So this is where it's difficult. If much or many is connected directly to the noun itself, the non-count noun, you're going to use much. But if it's connected to the measure word that is countable for the non-count noun, like this, then you're going to say many. So, too many cups of milk.
This is important because it shows the intent of the speaker when they saying too many cups of milk versus too much milk.
Right.
It shows that they actually have put thought into it about what they're going to actually talk about.
It's more precise. It's a more precise way to use an imprecise term, right? Because many and much, they're not very exact. You shouldn't write a science report on an experiment that you did using many and much. However, if you're talking about cups of flour, it's like, oh, did you put too many cups of flour into the batter? That's why it's too sticky, right? This is something that you can use to measure or to kind of signal to the person to estimate what went wrong. And what went wrong is the measure of flour that went in. But you could say too much flour as well, and that's equally appropriate in that context. But generally speaking, we're going to use cups when we're trying to be more precise, like following a recipe.
Right.
So some examples of these measure words are like rounds. We use rounds when we're playing video games or board games. Like maybe we'll say Jack played 2 rounds of Catan.
Or the forecast says that there will be 3 inches of snow tonight.
So these are ways that we use measure words with non-count nouns to make them more countable, more understandable.
Yeah, 2 rounds, 3 inches.
Right. The only thing is in English, in American English in particular, there's no way to really measure emotion. Because we can say too much emotion or not enough emotion, but we really can't say anything about like, he's got 2 cups of love. You can't do that. We don't have a measure word for love. That's where we get a lot of colorful idioms like, I love you to the moon and back.
Right.
Or I love you this much. We do this with little kids a lot.
Or his heart is full or something like that.
Right. We'll use things like that, but we don't have a measure word for emotions. We don't really have a measure word for history or subjects of study either. Yeah. So, I mean, you could say books of history, but then you're referring to the books, not to history itself. So if you're going to talk about history itself, there's not a really specific way to quantify time, really, in that sense, in terms of history. I mean, you could count years and minutes and eras, but we don't have a way to describe how much history is packed into a room. Yeah. If that makes sense. Like how many centuries a room has seen. We can count the time itself, but we can't count like the experience, the history, the events that happened there. We can't really do that.
Yeah. So, for example, when you're using a measure word plus a non-count noun, generally speaking, you will use many, not much. So, for example, that's too many pieces of candy for you to eat in one sitting.
Yeah, how many times have we had to say that? There are too many types of bread for me to choose from.
Or many bottles of water were handed out at the game.
So you can see how we are using an imprecise. We're saying that there's a lot, but not exactly how much, while we use a measure word for the non-count noun. So you could also say, and we often do in American English, we often say they handed out a lot of water at the game. Yeah. And we understand by context, they weren't handing out like handfuls of water or buckets of water. We know by context, the most practical way for them to do that was to hand out bottles of water. However, you will never use much with a count noun. So you're never going to say there's too much dog.
All right, guys. So that's it for this video. Whether or not to use many or much comes down to whether or not you're talking about a count noun or a non-count noun.
Right, and whether or not you're using a measure word to count that non-count noun. To help you guys remember, because we know it's a little bit difficult and a little bit confusing, we have designed some worksheets for you. You can grab them at the link in the description. Just go in there, put in your email, and we will send you those worksheets, and then we will send you answers shortly after, just to make sure that you are understanding this concept, that you're able to practice it a bit.
Yeah. And so you can print these out. They are going to go right to your email so you can work on them. Practice makes better. So try to figure them out and make sure that you look out for those answers that will come later so that you can check yourself for the right answer so that you can reinforce this information. So it's not just one video and done, but that you actually get some repetition and practice with many and much.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope that you get to work out those worksheets. We'd love to see how you did in the comments below.
Thank you so much, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.
Bye.